Doron Petersan is the founder of Sticky Fingers Bakery. Craving traditional guilt-laden foods, she was determined to unlock the secrets of creating their animal-free counterparts for everyone to enjoy. With a degree in nutrition and food science, Doron brought memories of favorite treats to vegan reality. Everything Doron does is so that she can eat, create, cook, and feed. Over to you, Doron.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
All good? Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much for letting me be a part of this super cool program. If you were wondering, I really love plants. I love to eat them. I love to enjoy them. I love to feed people plants. I love to cook with plants because I'm vegan, and being vegan led me to this wonderful lifestyle, right? And not only as a lifestyle, but as a career. So I'll just give you a really quick background. A million years ago, when I was a young budding child of about 22, I was really interested in making the world a better place for animals. And it turns out that one of the greatest ways to do that is to follow a vegan diet, right? And starting as a vegetarian, where I only ate plants, but also eggs and dairy, I quickly learned that if my concern was for the treatment of animals and also for the treatment of the earth, right, for environmental reasons, that eating a vegan plant-based diet was the best way to go, and still is. To this day, it's not getting any harder. If anything, it's getting easier, and it became my life's mission to make it easier for everyone to enjoy all of their favorite foods without missing one single bite. If I can make it easier for everyone to eat their favorite products, then I'm making a difference for the animals and the earth. Tiny, tiny, tiny little bite at a time, literally one cookie at a time. That is my life's mission. So jumping ahead, I went to school for food and nutrition. I took a lot of food science classes, and I learned a lot about the science behind making everything from cake to braising meat to extracting oils to making your favorite foods, right? But how to happen. And it's not only about the eggs and the butter, it's about the science behind it. And so taking that thought process, that really isn't as difficult as it sounds, right? Like all of the ingredients, all the science is right here in front of you. You just have to manipulate it into a way where you get to enjoy it, right? So what happens when we make products that are traditionally made with eggs and butter and milk, and we use plant-based alternatives? Well, the answer is that you still get an absolutely delicious cookie or cake or cupcake or celebratory item. Choose it, right? No matter what it is, we can recreate it. So again, it's about the science behind it. And I'm going to show you how that happens according to the laws of this demo today, which is all about plants, right? There's nothing here in front of you that is not related to a product that was grown in this, out of the ground that we walk on. So I think all of you have the recipe. You can follow along, you can bake along, you can just watch and then order cookies at the end from our website. Well, we're making them as we speak. I'm going to do something. Hold on. So I am in the bakery, right? This used to be our kind of dining space, and we transitioned during the pandemic so that we could do more classes. So this is the impromptu studio, and then also we could manufacture and send and ship more products. So what is happening behind me right now is we've got some serious packaging happening. So hundreds and hundreds of cookies are being packaged right behind me, and it never gets old. They never lose their deliciousness, and there's not a day that goes by that one doesn't happen to pop its way into my mouth. So it's really great here. It's crazy sometimes, but it's lovely. There's never a lack of cookies, and that's what I'm here to give to you. So we have a recipe that is really easy to follow, really basic, straightforward. As you can see, all of these ingredients are ones that you can easily find in your cabinets. They're ones that you use for baking already, but there might be some slight different adjustments that you will easily find in any grocery food store. I was just in traveling. I was in Puerto Rico and we made chocolate chip cookies. Everything can be found in like the outermost corner of the world, I promise you. So I'm going to read along because one of the most important things about baking is to follow the directions, pay attention. This is where details are important, right? Make sure you're measuring properly, that you have the right utensils to measure, and that you're following the directions in order. So you can't start from the bottom and like go up. That never works. All right, most important step first, number one on that recipe is preheat your oven to 350. There's nothing we can do unless we preheat that oven. With this humidity and just the ambient temperature of the air, your oven is going to preheat pretty quickly, so it might actually get a little bit hotter. That's okay. We're gonna work through this. The second thing that you're going to do is you're going to get your baking sheet ready. So I have a baking sheet that is just a standard pan, and I like to line everything with parchment paper, and that is because I like to make sure that there's the least amount of cleanup possible. And parchment paper can be used over and over again, but if you don't have it, just take a little bit of oil. You can spray it, or using a paper towel or napkin and just spread a little bit of oil on this pan and save that for later. As you can see, I always follow my recipes because I will start chatting. I'll get super excited about cookies and I'll forget to follow the directions. I never memorize anything. I've been doing this for, like I said, a million years, and I absolutely always have the recipe right next to me. If I lose it, here's my little plug. I have a cookbook right here. Again, you can find all this stuff on the website, which is stickyfingersbakery.com.
Thanks, Doron. We will post that in the chat as well.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to use a hand mixer today. This recipe can be made with a wooden spoon and a bowl. It can be made with a stand mixer, but these handy dandy hand mixers are super easy. They have a lot of fierce force to them, so you just want to make sure if it's your first time using it, you're really careful. Make sure that your whisks are really popped in there nice and tight. And I always give it a little test to make sure, pointing down. Turn it on, look at that, it works perfect. And then I take my largest bowl and I'm going to follow the directions from the top. I have non-hydrogenated margarine. What does that even mean? That is, Earth Balance is the brand that we use the most. It's most consistent, easy to find. It's a healthier option, and it's also the ingredients that they used are sourced very well. So we don't ever have to worry about questioning whether or not the ingredients are questionable. So what does cold pressed mean, right? This is a cold pressed oil. An oil is something that is liquid at room temperature, and plants, most plants and seeds contain oil, right? It's the fat that the nutrients, part of the nutrients that are used in the growth process of plants, or it's something that we can utilize once we eat and digest it. So where are these non-hydrogenated oils coming from, and how does it turn into margarine? It's a very extensive process that I know about this much of. It is cold pressed, where they take the oils from the seeds and from the plants, so olive oil, palm fruit oil, and canola oil, and from those seeds it is extracted and then pressed in a cold process where it becomes solid at room temperature. So it actually removes the hydrogen and it becomes more solid. That is way back from organic chemistry that we don't really need to talk about right now, right? Except non-hydrogenated oils are stable at room temperature only if they are solidified. So liquid oils are also non-hydrogenated, but they're liquid, right? And it gets a little bit complicated. All you need to know is that Earth Balance is the one that we use, that is the one that we like the best. There are quite a few options if you're looking for an alternative to butter, right? So why would you need an alternative to butter? Well, if you're looking to avoid dairy, if you're allergic to it, if you have a sensitivity to it, if you're trying to include more plants in your diet, or if you're trying to take out excess saturated fats or excess cholesterol, right? Cholesterol is the solid fat that is found only in animal products. Then we want to switch to a plant-based alternative for oil. So I'm going to cream this. And one of the things that's really important about using the solid fats is the way that they cook and the way that they cool is utilized in baking, almost every aspect of baking. There's very few only oil-based cakes or cookies. They're out there. They definitely are out there, but the magic is in the mixing and the other ingredients that go in there. So this hydrogenated oil, or I'm sorry, non-hydrogenated oil is going to melt. And then when it cools, it's going to come back together and give our cookie a really nice texture. So it's really important for the texture. And it really tastes good because flavor travels on fat, and fat's delicious in and of itself. And then when you start adding sugar and vanilla to it, like, get out. It's so delicious. All right. So what does cream mean? Cream means that you want to make your concoction look creamy. That means it shouldn't be chunky. Let me show you. So if we're following down the list of ingredients, I also have regular old sugar. Our sugar is cane sugar. You can also find sugar from beets. However, it's extracted. We also have dark brown sugar. This means that the molasses has either been left in the process or some has been taken out and then put back in. But that dark brown sugar has molasses in the sugar, and it gives it a really nice texture, and it gives it that really rich malty flavor that we love about chocolate chip cookies. All right, so I start mixing with my hand mixer, and this hand mixer has so much force and torque. I need to make sure that I have a bowl that's big enough, because I don't want to lose any of those ingredients. They're so important. And I start mixing until all of my ingredients are smooth. In this heat, with this humidity, it shouldn't take very long. But sometimes you'll just get a crumble, right? You just get a bit of a kind of moist crumble, and that's fine. But we want to cream this together. So we want to get it really nice and smooth, almost back to a liquidy consistency. So while I'm doing this, do you want to read off some of the questions if we're getting any? I'm happy to answer some questions.
Absolutely. Let me take a look at these questions. So our first is, can you use milk other than soy, and what would you recommend?
That is an excellent question. I use soy milk in almost all of my baking because soy milk is most closely, the nutritional panel is most closely related to traditional milk. So if I'm creating or recreating a recipe that is a traditional baking recipe, my first go-to is to soy milk. It has the right amount of protein and the right amount of fat. So it kind of mimics whole milk. Almond milk is a lot waterier and thinner. If you look at your nutrition facts on the side of the box, you can see that almond milk is great for smoothies, delicious, but it has very little protein, very little fat, and very little carbohydrate. It's mostly water. Soybeans have a lot of protein in them, and the protein that is in soy really holds on to water. It binds something like 400 times its weight in water. And that is really beneficial when you are creating a vegan product as opposed to a non-vegan product. So regular milk has a lot of protein in it. It has a lot of fat. And because of those two things together, it makes food really moist. It also has that sugary lactose in it that everybody deliciously loves. And soybeans also have sugar. A lot of the soy milks have added sugar, and I haven't found there to be much of a difference between unsweetened or sweetened. The only thing you have to make sure of is if you're making a gravy at home, don't get the vanilla soy milk. I've made that mistake, and vanilla sausage or veggie sausage gravy or onion gravy just not fabulous. You can do it, but ideally you want to do it, unsweetened original. What we use second to soy milk is oat milk. And the only reason we use it second to soy milk is because it's more expensive and it's more difficult to find consistently. So soy milk is the leader in the market. And when we talk about availability and talk about distribution, that's a whole other class, and we can do that next week. It's not nearly as fun as making cookies, but it's really consistent and available, and it's inexpensive. It's an excellent source of protein. nutritionally, soy has all of the necessary amino acids that you need outside of your body, right? So what you need to consume, all the amino acids that make up complete proteins that you need to consume, soy is a complete protein. So you don't have to worry about being deficient in one amino acid or another, which gets really complicated. Who counts their amino acids? I surely don't. I just eat a lot of varieties of food. But if you're switching to or opting for some vegan options, soy gets a bad rap, and we can talk about all of the issues that that could be a great other class, like talking about why soy is fabulous, but how to make sure that you're eating safe soy. So make sure it's organic, make sure it's non-GMO, and it's a really great source of protein if you're switching to a plant-based option. Any other questions before we
Thanks, Doron.
add some more?
We've got another question here. Do you ever cook baked goods with whole grains and or date sugar?
Yes, but I don't use my recipes. So converting a recipe like this to using whole grains and date sugar will give you a very different consistency. Whole grains still have the hull, which is going to interfere when we start mixing and utilizing the protein aspect of holding our baked goods together. It'll make it more crumbly, is the quick answer for that. Something like cookies, not so worried about. Cookies are really forgiving. If you want to play with a recipe and start adding some other alternatives, I would say start with this recipe. It's very forgiving. You can quickly see what happens if something goes wrong. If the cookie falls apart and you used a whole grain, you might need to add a little bit more flour. So it's not that you can't do it. It's just that you would need to adjust the recipe. But before you do that, you have to know what each ingredient does. Once we add the flour, I can talk to you about some whole grains. I prefer to eat my whole grains as grains, and I prefer to eat my cookies as cookies. I am the farthest I go into messing with my dessert is vegan. That's as far as I'm going to go. Anything after that, like, I love dates, I love figs, I love grains, but I'm going to eat this chocolate chip cookie, and I want it as like sweet and as fatty and as delicious and as decadent as possible. So I hope that answers your question, sort of.
I hope so too. Thank you, Doron. And I'll have one more question here. We've got other questions, but I won't keep you forever, so we can get on with our cookies here. But let's see. If someone wants to avoid oils and fats in baking, is there a good substitute for margarine or oil? It's a tough one.
No.
Yep. Simple.
There isn't. Very simple. Yeah. It has to do with the science behind it. So if you want a crumb that is moist, you're going to have to use fat. If you want to avoid fat, you're getting closer to a sweet bread. So if you have a bao bread, there's not so much fat in there. Fat inhibits the way that the protein binds together and forms. And with less of it, you're going to get a tighter bond. You're going to get think about the difference between a sponge cake and a piece of white bread. White bread is virtually fat-free, and that sponge cake has a lot of fat in it and also a lot of protein. The fat kind of gets in the middle of everything and coats. Okay, so the non-hydrogenated margarine that we put in here, we've liquefied it, right? When we start baking, I'm going to walk through this. This is a great question. So I'm going to walk through the rest of the recipe with this. We start taking our fat and our liquid and our oil, which is our soy milk, and I've used vegetable oil, which is a mix of canola oil. I'm going to mix these together just because it's easier to pour into my batter. And then I have leavening agents, and my leavening agents are all heat and liquid based. So I have baking powder and I have baking soda. Baking powder is baking soda, but it has governor in it. And the governor basically, or you can call it a mayor if you want, the governor cuts it so it slowly reacts, and then when it hits heat, it reacts again, right? So baking soda reacts when it hits liquid acid. what is liquid acid in here? There's not much. We don't have a ton of acid. And what that does is it makes the reaction happen slowly. So it's reacting with the liquid and then it's reacting with the acid. The baking powder is double acting. When it hits heat, it reacts again. What happens with baking soda and baking powder when it hits liquid acid and when it hits heat? It creates carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide expands when it hits heat. So what you're doing is you're making bubbles 2 times. And you're expanding those bubbles in 2 different ways. We're creating bubbles when we cream the margarine together. We're creating like little air holes in between the fat and the sugar and the flour. And then with our baking powder and baking soda, we are creating little bubbles that are reacting from the carbon dioxide. When it hits the heat, those bubbles are getting bigger. What we're doing with the heat while it's sitting in the oven is we are cooking, caramelizing the sugar and the flour. And the flour has reacted, so it's making protein strands and it's making carbohydrate strands. So the carbohydrate and the protein help to create these strands that once it cooks and then cools, hold its shape. What's in the center of all those little holes and bubbles that you've made? Fat. Without that fat, it's dry. And when you put it into your mouth, it feels dry and it tastes dry. And what happens when something tastes dry? You can't taste the flavor in it. So if you have a vanilla cake that is fat-free, you can't taste that flavor. So all of the fat-free options of like cookies and biscuits and crackers all have a lot of chemically altered flavors in order to make your body think that it tastes like vanilla, right? So really the best way to get all of these flavors that are mixed in that make the cookie taste delicious is to put enough fat in it so that flavor travels. Vanilla ice cream is one of the most difficult products to make apparently because the vanilla is such a delicate flavor and you have to make sure that it travels and that it stays in there and it's cold, right? Our bodies don't necessarily recognize flavor very well when something is really cold. So vanilla ice cream has like, you know, a lot of vanilla in it. It's also a lot of fat. Fat-free vanilla ice cream is not exactly a natural process. So that's my little lecture for you today on fat-free stuff. It's not a natural way to make a cookie. It's a natural way to make bread or a biscuit. Something very important about these leavening agents. I'm going to add them to my flour because they're really delicate and they're really small amounts of ingredients compared to my flour. I have 4 cups of all-purpose flour and I only have 3 teaspoons total for my leavening agents. So I want to make sure it gets dispersed in here so that we don't have any giant pockets of baking soda, which we all know is disgusting and tastes like soap, and any small pockets of the flour. I left my whisk. I would just take a whisk and mix this, or your fingers, and we're just mixing it through the flour. If you see recipes where you sift the flour, it will recommend to sift the leavening agents in with that flour, and it just helps aerate it, it helps mix it through, it helps gets it nice and fluffy so there's no chunks in there.
Hey, Doron, while you're mixing, we have
Sure.
someone who likes to, in baking, cut the sugar amounts in half. From a chemistry perspective, can you let us know, what happens to your baked goods when you reduce the sugar that way?
Yeah, you can reduce the sugar, right? What it's going to do is change the texture of your cookie. So if you're going for a really chewy cookie and you cut the sugar in half, you're going to get a fluffier, more biscuity cookie. So if you want to cut the sugar in half and maintain that chewy texture, you're going to need to increase the liquid, which is going to change your baking time. So it can totally be done. You might have a slightly different color to your cookie, but the difference is going to be a thin, chewy cookie and like kind of a puffy cookie. So each will be delicious, I'm sure. But it's just depending on what what texture you're going for. But if you're looking to reduce the amount of sugar, you can totally reduce it. The sugar helps aerate and obviously flavor, right? It really helps with the texture in terms of that crunch of the cookie. And it also helps with the color. So you get that caramelization effect on the top of your cookie. The other thing that traditional baking helps with that is the lactose in the milk and also your eggs and egg yolks. So vegan baking does not get as dark as traditional cookies. So that's why watching those cookies, really looking at them as they're baking and then making sure that you can smell the caramelization and you can smell that cookie baking, rather than just saying like, oh, this looks like a dark cookie. It's not going to get the same color. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, that was all really great information. Thank you.
Whenever it comes to adjustments, I always say make the recipe first, the way it's followed, the way it's written, follow that, and then make one adjustment at a time. So if you want to cut back on your sugar, cut back on the sugar. If you're looking to change one of the oils or reduce the amount of oil, do that one time, right? Don't make all your changes at once, because then you won't know what happens if it doesn't come out the exact way that you need it to. And I surely won't be able to figure it out. That's like a giant math problem that's really hard. Okay, I'm gonna add this flour into my wet mixture. And I'm going to take all the liquid and I'm gonna do half and half at a time, only because I don't want to splatter it all over the walls. This is where you can just start mixing with a wooden spoon if you want. I'm going to add my salt in with that flour, make sure it's just mixed together. And I'm going to take this vanilla and I'm going to drop it right into my liquid. And then I'm going to start adding wet and then dry, mixer on low. Add a little bit in there. See, even low, this mixer is like really excited to mix cookies. You don't want to overmix. Overmixing will give you a very tough cookie, not crunchy, tough, like hard to chew tough. Like think about trying to chew a Jolly Rancher versus trying to chew an Airhead. Both are tough. If you've had those candies, which my 10-year-old has spent a lot of time eating this summer. All right, we'll give you half and half again. A little bit more than half. So you see that was really quick. And if there's lumps, it's okay. It's okay. It does not have to be thin like pancake batter. It should be lumpy at this point. You just want to make sure everything is incorporated. So you hold the bowl with one hand and then you let it spin. And then you just let the mixer do its work. And then one more time. And then on this last, I like to add the chocolate chip. Grab those. The magic of television. Hi. Sometimes you get deliveries of chocolate chips as you are doing a video of how chocolate chip cookies are made.
I'm very jealous of that giant bag of chocolate chips.
Oh, this is just you wait. Just you wait. So we usually get about 300 pounds of chocolate chips at a time. And it looks so innocent. Like, look at all those chocolate chips. Surely if I take one handful and eat them, it shouldn't matter. But being in a production kitchen, we have to be very careful of watching the ingredients, especially right now, as with the pandemic, it's been a little bit more difficult to get things regularly as our transportation networks have been opening up. So every chocolate chip is sacred. So these are dark chocolate chips, and it's really your preference. You can take a chocolate bar and break it up. You can use small chocolate chips, big chocolate chips, whichever you like. So now my mix is a little bit crumbly. That's fine. If yours is super, super smooth, almost where it looks shiny and wet, you can put it into the fridge and let it solidify a little bit. This will help in forming it when we're putting it on the pan, and also when it's baking. If you want a really thin spread of a cookie, a warmer batter is okay. If you want kind of a high puffy cookie, you want it to be a little bit colder. So everything that we just used, obviously, as we said, was from plants, right? So you have all-purpose flour is from wheat. We have our margarine, which is made from seeds and plants. We have our sugar, which is made from cane or beets or dates. We have soy milk, obviously fresh soybeans, a little bit of extra water in there. Vegetable oil, our vegetable oil was canola oil and a mix of other vegetable oils. Vanilla beans. Vanilla is extracted from the vanilla bean, either using oil or using alcohol. All-purpose flour, that is our generally white flour that does not have the hull in it. It's ideal. I use all-purpose, unbleached, unbromated King Arthur flour is our flour of preference for our white flour. And then baking powder, baking soda, which is a type of ash, very, very basic. And then salt, depends on whether you found it from, ultimately it's from the ocean, right? But either a salt mine or it's been salted and dried from the ocean. And then chocolate chips. And chocolate chips, obviously from the cocoa bean. I'm saying obviously because so many people think that chocolate is a dairy product. Chocolate is a vegetable. Chocolate is plant-based. Chocolate is a dairy product once you add liquid dairy into it and fat from dairy into it. So if you see something that says buttermilk or butter fat in, I'm sorry, not buttermilk, butter fat in ingredients for chocolate chips. Once you extract the cocoa, once you grind down the cocoa bean, in order to turn it into this cute little tasty chocolate chip, it has to be mixed with some fat and some sugar. And we do that by melting the sugar down and adding in delicious fat, cocoa butter. It was generally used because it melts really easily. It's inexpensive, it's consistent, it's delicious. And then you have yourself a chocolate chip. A lot of companies will use milk fat or butter fat because also it's a very easy way to smooth out those flavors. And we know that dairy is delicious, right? But if we make sure that we are utilizing everything in the way that it's intended and we follow that recipe, all these plant-based options are going to give you a cookie that is just as delicious, if not better. So now what? Now we make sure that our ovens are nice and hot, and we take our tray that, remember, we oiled in the very, very beginning. And then we use a scoop, preloaded scoop. If you don't have a preloaded scoop, you can use a tablespoon. The preloaded scoops I love because it's easy to get a cookie that is exactly the same size every single time, and then getting it out of this little spoon is way easier than like scooping it out of a tablespoon. And then you don't have to roll it in your hand, which rolling it in your hand will melt the oils that are nice and perfectly distributed throughout this cookie dough so that we get wonderful baking striation. And the carbon dioxide from the leavening agents can form, the bubbles can go ahead and expand, the protein and the carbohydrate from the flour can bind together. And as it breaks down, once we start cooking, and we'll form that little cell. Sometimes it's called a sponge in cake. Sometimes it's called a cell. In a cookie, it's just called delicious. So as you can see, that's nice and fast. And you get perfectly even cookie puffs. These can be frozen. This dough can be frozen. My suggestion is to turn them into cookie puffs first and then put them in the freezer, because if not, you have to defrost all of this cookie dough. And then what are you going to do once you defrost all the cookie dough? You're going to eat it because it's all defrosted. Defrosting, refrosting, or refreezing is not great for the cookie dough. It's not great for the leavening agents in there. So if you're not going to make all your cookies today, you can go ahead and scoop these out, put them in the freezer. You can put them in the fridge too. I would make them within a week if you are going to put them in the fridge. Once you bake them, you can also freeze them up to 6 months if they are wrapped nice and tight. And it is a nice little trick that I like to do at home. Clearly at the shop, we don't keep anything that long. We wouldn't be in business for very long if we had to freeze our cookies for 6 months, but I digress. So let's go ahead and take these, pop them in the magic oven, which is right underneath the table magically. And then magically at the same time, they have baked themselves into a wonderful, beautiful, chewy cookie. So I'm going to come a little bit closer. So these are fresh baked cookies, just about, I don't know, hour and a half ago. As you can see, they are slightly less dark than a traditional cookie. And the tops are just a little bit blondier than they are dark and crunchier. You can, if you really want a vegan dark cookie, you can add a little bit more molasses to it. Make sure you use dark brown sugar. I want to eat all these cookies. What do you want to do with these cookies?
I wish I could reach through my screen right now. This is very tempting.
It's torture. My life's work is just torture. It's very glamorous. I just stand here looking at cookies all day long. It's torture. I love it so much. I love making cookies. I love being able to share these recipes with people. So if you're interested in more recipes, we have cookbooks, and all those recipes are intended to be yours, right? So you take a chocolate chip cookie recipe and then you take it and you add other flavors and other things to it. You adjust it, you get creative, you try new things, and then you bring me a cookie. That's what this is all about. It's really having fun and being able to find new ways to kind of try out an old thing, right? Like just because it's traditional baking doesn't mean that that's the only way that we have to do it. And I've been doing it now for 1,000,002 years. It's really fun. This part's really fun, watching people eat. Sometimes they're eating something that is obviously vegan for the first time. I mean, everybody eats all vegan stuff, right? Water, apples, Oreo cookies, peanut butter, pasta, most tomato sauces. Most stuff in your life is plant-based. So what's so scary about it? Nothing. I'm just here to show you that it can be done in a really fun way. Do we have more questions?
We've got a few more questions. If you've got time,
I love it.
We've got a few more questions. That is
Bring it
awesome.
on.
Thanks for sticking with us, Doron. Is there a difference between shelf-stable and refrigerated soy milk?
Yes. If it's a fresh soy milk and it's refrigerated, it has not been treated so that it is shelf-stable. These packages, like the ones that are shelf-stable, they're just heated to a certain temperature to make sure that you don't get sick, that there's certain bacteria that can't thrive. So like they're vacuum sealed and they're heated to a specific temperature. Things that need to be refrigerated need to stay refrigerated. So if you leave your soy milk out, it is protein, it is sugar, and it is water. That means that it is a great place to grow bacteria. So don't just leave your soy milk out. You have to treat it like, and a lot of people make this mistake. This should be treated like regular, like cow's milk dairy, goat's milk dairy. It should not be treated like plants.
That was good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
We've got another question. Someone's looking for vegan fluff, like the marshmallow.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, we have a recipe for that, but it's really dangerous. You have to heat your sugar really, really high and it burns easily. So if you have ever made candy and you have everything you need to get sugar heated to about 300 degrees, then you are in the right place. We are going to be adding some classes this fall, and marshmallow fluff is one of the requests. I'm always like, it is dangerous. You should be careful. You have to wear closed-toed shoes and you have to make sure that you have covered yourself in non-flammable material. I've burnt myself a lot on liquid sugar because it looks so innocent. And you're like, oh, look, it's fluff. It's so beautiful. And then next thing you know, you don't have any skin on your finger. And making marshmallows is really fun. Making vegan marshmallows is the same process. Instead of using gelatin, you can use agar, or there's different carrageenan, 2 types of carrageenan that you can use as well. But we will be working on scheduling some classes for the fall, so stay tuned. Check out our website for that.
That is good to know. Thanks, Doron. Let's see if I can get a couple more questions for you. So let's see. Someone's asking about the Earth Balance butter that you use. Do you use the sticks, the soy-free butter sticks, one of their spreads? What's your go-to Earth Balance?
Yeah, so we use the soy-free Earth Balance spread, buttery spread, for the majority of our baking. We use the buttery sticks for pie crust and laminated doughs. At home, I use the sticks for everything because they're measured out like regular butter sticks, and it's just easier. They're really hard to find right now, but those are my go-to.
Good to know. And speaking of pie crust, someone is looking for a good vegan pie crust recipe. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, at most pie crust, Crisco has a great recipe for pie crust if you're not afraid of eating Crisco. And the best pie crusts in the world are made with Crisco because they're like the most hydrogenated oil you can find outside of Tupperware. And it just works really well for extracting the water, which is the trick to making a really good pie crust, is not using too much liquid and not over mixing it. I am a horrible pie crust maker. I get excited and I completely overmix it every single time. So I'm really good at making pie crust crackers. I have a recipe in the book for 3 different types of pie crusts. This is where I think using whole grains for pie crust really helps, because you don't have to worry so much about really getting it flaky when you're using the whole grain flours. You just want to make sure it sticks together, and it just adds a lot of flavor to your fruit pies. I wouldn't really suggest it for chocolate cream pie. I would probably go to a more traditional crust for that, but you should try it and then bring me these.
Sounds delicious. We've got someone asking here. It's more of a comment. You're such a clean baker. I always make a mess, but this is really inspiring. So do you have any tips for staying clean while baking?
Yeah, clean as you go. Just keep cleaning as you go. One of the things that's really important is making sure that your utensils don't get too dirty. Once you get like where your handles are, once you get this dirty, like you're done. That there's no coming back from that. So I really like to spread out. I like to see all my toys in front of me, and that can be dangerous sometimes. So I've really taught myself to like put my ingredients here and mix right in front of me, and then really utilize the space underneath, and then making sure that you're cleaning your hands as you go. So once your hands start to feel dirty, like it just really helps keeping everything else clean. And then just wiping up stuff as you're going along. It's the trick to keeping it's not only the trick to keeping things clean, and it's also a safety issue, right? Like We don't want anybody slipping on anything that falls on the floor, but it's also really important when it comes to staling. You want to keep as little dust in the air. Like we're making flour dust all day long, right? But the more exposed dust or more exposed flour there is that we have to clean up, we make more dust. The more dust a bakery has, the more liquid it absorbs in the air, and then it tends to stale out your products faster. It also adds to mold, right? So like the dirtier your area is, the faster you're going to spread that dirt, right? That dust. And then that's more surface area for bacteria. So I think over the past 22 years that I've been doing this, I've forced myself. It's really the only area in my life where I'm really, really tidy. That and like my sock drawer. I really like my socks folded.
Those are some great tips. We've got 2 more questions from our audience here. First is, can you make aquafaba at home, or do you have to use canned beans?
Oh, Aquafaba is just bean water. And it works really well with chickpeas because of the chemical makeup of chickpeas and the ratio of protein to water content to starch and the way that the starch is extracted from the chickpeas. So the chickpeas work the best. You can do it with mung bean, you can do it with soybean water. I mean, it doesn't always have the same consistency. That aside, it's easier to do it with canned chickpeas because they're in that water longer, right? So that liquid is more viscous. That liquid has more protein and starch in it. When you make it at home, I know people who use that chickpea water. I'm pretty sure. I'm pausing for a second because a friend of mine, one of the owners of Pow Pow, she was making her own milks, making her own bean milks. And I believe she's using all that aquafaba when she is in the batters that she's using to like dip burgers, the veggie burgers and different, like using it in pancakes. I have never made my own milk and then used that in making a cake. I've only ever used chickpea water from a can, and because it's thicker. If you're having trouble with, if you're trying to use aquafaba and you're having trouble with it, you can try and cook it first. That helps cook off some of the moisture in it, so it just gives you a higher percentage of protein and starch.
Awesome, thank you. And for our last question,
sure.
If a traditional recipe calls for melted butter, can someone substitute a neutral oil like canola or grapeseed?
Most likely not. It depends on the recipe, but if it's a cake, no. If it is just a sauce, yes. But remember that oil that's solid is, if you're using it in something that you need to utilize that solid structure, you might melt it to mix it into a recipe and make sure that it gets dispersed evenly. But then once it's cooling, it comes back to more of a solid structure, and that might be necessary for the outcome. It just depends on the recipe.
Awesome. This was such a fantastic presentation, Doron, and we're getting a lot of love in the chat, or I should say you're getting a lot of love in the chat. And so
thank you.
I just want to say thank you for a wonderful presentation today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. This has been really fun. I love being able to kind of showcase what we do, how we do it, give the basics, and really show people that